Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk. This is Roger Chen from University of San Francisco. In this video program, we interview business leaders, entrepreneurs, and leading experts from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, Asia, and beyond. This program is sponsored by University of San Francisco Center for Business Studies and Innovation in Asia Pacific. Hello, this is Roger Chen from University of San Francisco Center for Business Studies and Innovation Asia Pacific, or CBSI Asia Pacific. And today we are very pleased to have Vinnie Gupta coming to talk to us. Thank you, Vinnie.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, why don't you briefly introduce yourself and also your company?
Absolutely, Roger. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor. Several of our students have been to your university. My vice president programs with a doctorate in education from USF. It's a great honor. My name is Vinnie Gupta. I am president of UCEazy, spelled as UCEazy, College Admissions Academy. Our mission is to help students stand out in college admissions.
The first question I have is about your practice and your strategy in dealing with the competition, and more specifically in your strategy practice. Do you mainly kind of monitoring competitors' moves and respond to their move as part of your strategy, or you pay close attention to customers, to understand their needs, rather than kind of monitoring and responding to competitors' move?
I love this question. The short answer is that our biggest focus is on an unmet customer need. And are the current solutions working for them or not? Brand name competition, you kind of keep them somewhere in the side view mirror or some such thing, but the bigger competition thing, I have a full-time MBA and from a prestigious institute in India called the Indian Institute of Management. And one of the key frameworks that I got from there is the Michael Porter competitive strategy model. I have a feeling I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys live in this world. I'm a big believer that competition's got to be, you need to look at this brand name. I think brand name competition comes at a much lower level. Highest level is generic competition. And as a part of that, a big competition is also for the customer not to do anything. Inaction is a competition also. So I try to take a holistic view. In what we try to do, actually, if you ask me what is your biggest competition, customer staying where they are and not doing anything. So to take that latent need and to convert that into an active need is a big competition. So, but overall, I think we just got to, for future entrepreneurs, I really think that the best way to look at this is that where is a unmet market need, and the pain of that to your target customer base is that so intense that they just say, you know what, I can't live with it. Anything short of that, you'll spend a lot of time educating the market. And brand name competition, I mean, there are certain strategies, Roger, where you go into mature markets and you compete against competition and in some different ways, right? You can do that, but by and large, I think it's much easier to find a white space in the market and go after that.
That's a great point. So very briefly, what you mentioned, the brand name competition, could you just very briefly clarify that term? What do you mean by that?
Brand name competition would be that for a certain market category, like for example, in the world that we are in, college admissions counseling is the genre. And there are companies there that have been doing this even before UCEazy started, and individuals there. So there are a handful of companies with some kind of brand recognition. We really don't pay much attention to that. What we're trying to do is to change the playing field. Conceptually, like Uber made yellow cabs redundant. I think that the biggest gains will come if you define a new market category.
Yeah, actually, we have a term called the blue ocean strategy.
Thank you. Exactly,
That's
the
great.
blue ocean strategy. And,
Yeah.
and it works in real world. Going against other brand names is very attritional, and it ain't fun, I can tell you that, because I'm an ideas guy, right? I enjoy creating big solutions. Fighting against some other brand name people, the way I look at this is that I have limited time on this earth. Why am I doing something that's been done a billion times
By
before?
other people, that's a great point.
I mean, people, companies fighting against other companies, it's not new. Countries fighting against other countries is not new. I don't want to go there. It's like I have limited life.
That's a great point. Thank you. Actually, that kind of, it's a very natural segue to my next question. In other words, in your strategy or in your business practice, you do a lot of like a customer potential needs discoveries kind of thing.
Indeed.
So the next question, maybe already touched upon, is about innovation. Innovation basically means you improve your products, your feature, or you just go out to explore very, very new products, very new features. So typically, if you categorize them, some of those exploring innovation activities, because they are very new, very, very uncertain, so they tend to be risky, but potentially have a higher return. And sometimes we call this type of innovation radical innovation, while on the other extreme is kind of a conservative, low risk, but incremental improvement of your offerings or features. So the question is, as a company, does your company kind of continuously and also proactively search for these so-called radical innovation, the very new, very different, highly risky, but highly potential return type of innovation activities?
Yeah, Roger, in our case, we've actually done the more incremental type stuff. And that is because we are still self-funded.
Self-funded, okay.
If we-
Financial consideration. Yeah.
Right, so we need to manage cash flow, and we're essentially growing through internal accruals. But if we had external funding available, we could go for completely game-changing innovation, which is actually what we now want to do, because now we have a very clear picture of what we want to do and how we want to get there. So I think from my perspective, it will depend upon the funding situation of the company and how much cash or how much capital.
That's excellent, excellent point.
Do you have to play with?
Yeah, so it's kind of in other words, your capability of dealing with this kind of risk or the consequence of those risks. So relating to that, maybe this additional question, because earlier you said you as a company, you put a lot of efforts on so-called the unmet needs and discover customer needs. So how do you, what is the process or what is the methodology to uncover those unmet needs? And so do you always guarantee those unmet needs can only be satisfied through your incremental changes, or sometimes it requires major changes on your business or your offerings?
Yeah, excellent question. In our case, Roger, specifically, the first thing is that when we started UCEazy about 8 years back or so, the problem that we were trying to solve is something that I personally experienced.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times, don't they say that that the best entrepreneur or the best ideas come from something that you personally relate to?
Yeah, yeah.
So in this case, as I mentioned before, that UCEazy helps students with college admissions, and my journey was that I'm an immigrant into this country. So it's my wife, and when we came to this country from India 30 years back with our 2-year-old daughter, both of us, my wife and I, we were highly educated, professionally successful back in India. But we didn't have any first-hand experience of the US elementary school, middle school, high school, college admissions, college, careers. We had no idea. Cultural, values, everything was different. So we really struggled with all of that. So based on that, I said, if highly educated, and I'm not stupid, I mean, I'm not being immodest, but I'm a smart guy. And my wife, she's very smart, she's actually even a school teacher in Cupertino where we live. If the two of us are struggling, imagine millions of other families.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, Roger, in this case, how did we get to the unmet need? We felt it. And in the immigrant social ecosystem that we live in, everybody was going through that. The idea was a no-brainer. Now, how to solve that problem? That has been a journey. Initially, we started based upon how others were solving that problem. We applied those solutions. Then we just realized that none of those are working. And then we kept adding. And then we said, okay, if our goal is 10 on a 10-point scale, this has now taken us to 5, incrementally 2 more. And then recently, we realized that, you know what? We can look at this whole thing so differently that the goalpost can move from 10 to a 30.
Oh.
Right? Where we just think of the whole thing so differently that we can just change the game overall. But to be very candid, neither my team nor I, we could not have thought like this unless we went through the journey. Now, there could be some entrepreneurs who are just much more brilliant than I am. There are, right? And some people who would think of this 30 right at the onset. I mean, those are the people that obviously become those huge unicorns.
Maybe you can call them visionary because they can see so far. Yeah.
Right.
But so here, relating to that, that's fascinating kind of a point. So on this journey, as you mentioned, you look at the same similar problem in a very, very different way, in a new light. You're kind of reframing this whole issue. Does that sometimes involve or require you to do some very, very radical change on your operation, the business model, to the point, then it's kind of risky choice for you?
Totally, Roger. And we are actually going through that right now.
Oh.
But we realize that this transition is going to be painful. But I feel comfortable as the leader of the team that now is the time to do it because all of us have the conviction that where we are going is the right thing to do.
Okay.
So we would have to shed old habits. We would have to go for different team not because the old team members were not good, because the thinking doesn't apply. So absolutely, Roger, it'll require a churn, it'll require a different way of thinking, but we got to do all this while protecting our revenue stream or not hurting it.
Yeah.
But above all, and this is very critical for anyone, that above all to keep our promises to the customers that we have acquired through the old model.
So you want to minimize the disruption on the customer experience as you're making those changes or transitions.
Yeah. And it also, from a moral and an ethical perspective, those customers did not decide to make that change, we did. So whatever promises we make to them, I think those promises morally and ethically have to be kept. Otherwise, how do you sleep at night? At least I don't.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So on this journey, as you mentioned, you look at the same similar problem in a very, very different way, in a new light. You're kind of reframing this whole issue. Does that sometimes involve or require you to do some very, very radical change on your operation, the business model, to the point, then it's kind of risky choice for you?
Totally, Roger. And we are actually going through that right now.
Oh.
But we realize that this transition is going to be painful. But I feel comfortable as the leader of the team that now is the time to do it because all of us have the conviction that where we are going is the right thing to do.
Okay.
So we would have to shed old habits. We would have to go for different team not because the old team members were not good, because the thinking doesn't apply. So absolutely, Roger, it'll require a churn, it'll require a different way of thinking, but we got to do all this while protecting our revenue stream or not hurting it.
Yeah.
But above all, and this is very critical for, I think, for anyone, that to above all to keep our promises to the customers that we have acquired through the old model.
So you want to minimize the disruption on the customer experience as you're making those changes or transitions.
And it also, just from a moral and an ethical perspective, those customers did not decide to make that change, we did. So whatever promises we make to them, I think those promises morally and ethically have to be kept. Otherwise, how do you sleep at night? At least I don't.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Actually, these are very, very interesting kind of points. So my next question is probably we already touched upon companies like you. I think your companies has been, as you mentioned, has been operating in many years, right?
For 8 years now.
For 8 years. So using the startup term, you already had product market fit, meaning you already had your stable core products, customer base. So for many of these companies, how to grow, how to scale up is a very important objective. So maybe could you share with us the challenges and also your solutions to address this growth challenge and also to achieve this scaling up objective?
Wow, it's almost like you're inside my head right now because this is what exactly we are going through. So the challenges, Roger, are multifold. But the first thing, and because we're having a candid, honest conversations, and many of our listeners are younger people who are trying to make an impact. So I'm just being very candid with everybody. I didn't know this earlier, but now I'm convinced if you don't scale, you will die. Everything else is noise. So do whatever, once you have product market fit, the next thing you need to do is to figure out a way to scale whatever it takes. Otherwise, it's going to be, you will not see it coming, but the death will come, sorry, excuse the bad term here, but it'll come from different angles that you cannot foresee. So, where are our challenges?
By the way, Vinnie, let me clarify why you say if you do not scale, you will die. Could you be a little bit more explicit? Are you talking about the disruptors? Are you talking about the market trend changes? Just to make a little bit clear for our audience.
In many different ways. So first, what happens is that without scale, you will, and obviously scaling, you will need capital and all of that stuff. But if you continue with incremental growth, you would be caught in a never-ending cycle of not enough resources to do the right things, not enough resources for advertising, not enough resources to hire the right talent, not enough resources to automate. It's a perpetual cycle. At some point of time, the constant chasing of not enough resources, it'll burn the leadership and the team out. Growing a company, making it into a unicorn or whatever it is, it's a long and arduous journey. Even for the best intentioned people, there are good days and bad days. I can promise you more bad days than good. You cannot keep running this marathon with a constant feeling of under-resourcing. The team will burn out, you start losing top talent. At some point, the leadership and the founders whose energy is driving all this, that energy will die. So that is the first part. The second, obviously, is that whatever idea propelled you, if you're not scaling fast enough, then you're leaving room for competition to come in. I think those are the two things. But my biggest thing is, again, specific to UCEazy, is the leadership needs to be in a good mental space, good emotional space, and that at some point you need to know that there is a huge runway ahead of you, and that you can take risks, try out new things, hire the right kind of people, and keep your eye on the ball versus constantly looking, do we have enough cash in the bank?
Okay. So it's interesting, actually, sorry, maybe I kind of stopped your kind of a thought. You kind of tried to mention your solution to tackle this growth challenge, and also relating to your early comment about this resource shortage cycle. How do you help the company or lead the company to break out that cycle and to scale up and grow?
Yeah. I think that, and this is what we are doing, Roger, so this is all from direct experience. I think that especially once you have this, what you think is a game-changing idea, and you're saying you're ready to scale, possibly breaking up the leadership team into a group of people who are chartered and compensated on protecting what you've got, and taking some resources, especially the CEO, on the scaling aspect of it. So keep the ongoing operations on one side, resource it, and then maybe a couple of people from the leadership team, they go into the scaling aspect of it, which is about raising capital. Scaling also requires hiring talent. And we know that hiring talent is not easy. It can be a full-time job. So that's how I would do this, is break it up. Many of my advisors have been saying that whenever you do these.
First question is, looking back your successful career journey, what are some of the enabling factors which you think is very crucial as a big lesson, to help your career development path?
I'm just trying to compose my thoughts. So I think it's in my case, there are three things that go into this. So the first is that the problem we're trying to solve and the market that we are trying to go after, at least initially, was very close to my own journey. So there was that fit. As I said, that initially when we started UCEazy, we were trying to help students from immigrant families with college admissions. And that was very close to my journey, so that helped. The second is that in my own journey, I started my career back in India. And then in the US, I think that exposure to different cultures and working with people from different cultures, different value systems, that creates a different way of thinking. And sometimes, if I can say so, gives you a different way of thinking about problem solving, going outside the box. The third one is that my journeys took me through small companies. I worked for several startups. One of them was the very first one in this country, was a small company where on their own they were kind of just spinning their wheels, and I helped unlock them by, and this is very relevant to UCEazy and possibly for our listeners, is the power of niche markets. N-I-C-H-E. I've never figured out how to pronounce that word, niche or niche marketing. I'm a big believer in the power of niche markets. So this company, to your question about my own journey, this company was a software company in LA. Great founders and all that stuff, but they were taking a horizontal view to solving a software problem, which I guided them, and I said that this is, you're trying to solve a problem in a new manner or a different manner. The best way to do that is to identify a niche group, solve the problem there. I don't know whether you or your listeners or our listeners, if you've heard Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm, that book was written in the context of technology innovation. I think it applies to a lot of places. So with this small company in LA, I advised the founder to apply niche marketing. She supported that. And that company grew like crazy from that point on. That's a lesson that I've imbibed. So when I started UCEazy, coming back to your question about my Asian journey, I'm an Indian American. So the problem statement that we were trying to solve is students from families where the parents are immigrants, highly educated, professionally successful, affluent, even those parents are struggling to support their children through college admissions and careers. This is the broad market. Now, this is smaller than us taking a horizontal approach and saying, we will help all students in the United States with college admission. That's horizontal.
Yeah.
We said we're going to go after the immigrant market, which is, say, 5% of the total, if we look at affordability. But then we said 5% is still too big because we are self-funded. We don't have the money for advertising. So we said, first thing first, we're going to go after the Indian American market in the Bay Area. Why? Because we understand this. It's local, so our cost of customer acquisition is low. To keep the cost of advertising low, we worked with community organizations that already had connections with all of these immigrant groups. It reduced our cost of customer acquisition. Once we got that right, we said, okay, what do we do next? Indian Americans in other parts of the country. What are they? New Jersey, Texas. So there is this bowling pin analogy model that Jeffrey Moore uses. I think it's an awesome framework. So if you can visualize bowling pins, 10 of those. So it's like the first bowling pin, start with that. Use that bowling pin to knock down adjacent bowling pins.
Yeah.
So you need to expand in two ways. Indian Americans succeed in one place, learn from there, cookie cutterize it. Indian Americans in Southern California, New Jersey. But then you apply a second framework. Who are the other similar groups? Chinese Americans. Where do we start from? Bay Area, or wherever else they're concentrated. Learn from there, cookie cutterize elsewhere. Third group, Filipinos, etc. So that is how the learnings that I had of this niche marketing thing, what it really helps with, and it's a huge lesson for me and for our listeners, is it's very hard unless you start with huge capitalization of some kind, which I didn't have. Imagine a pond and imagine an ocean, right? If you have this rock, if say this is a rock, and you drop it, where would the ripples be more?
Yeah, a small pond, yeah.
Small pond.
Yeah.
Now, if your competition wants to come after you, your ability to fend them off is much higher in a small pond. Why? Because you understand the nuances of the fish in that pond,
Yeah.
and word of mouth of that community will fend off competition. Because in that little pond, you become the first name. So Jeffrey Moore says, and I believe it, and it is like, whichever market you go after, say in 18 months or 24 months, grab something like 40% market share. Or this will be different for different markets, but a high enough market share where by the virtue of being the market leader, you create entry barriers for competition.
Yeah.
So just to summarize the answers to your question, how did my career help with this? I think international exposure, understanding two large markets and two different cultures, it helps in growth and problem solving. Second is my own journey through small and big companies. So this also helped me understand challenges of a small company, and also I can keep an eye on the horizon. This is where we need to go. I've also seen the wrong things that big companies do, so you know what not to do. We know that bigger companies at some point become enemies of their own innovation.
Yeah.
Right? And then the third is this that I internalized the power of niche markets.
Do you think your Asian culture or Asian heritage in a way affected your approach of creating, running your new venture business? If so, could you give us some example to explain that?
I wish my wife was listening to this. She's very smart, and she's an Indian, and we were married in India. One of the things that she says is, always keeps reminding me, go back to the basics in terms of how a small business would scale. So her idea basically was that you build a house in steps.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't jump to the third story until the first one is built.
Right.
where I'm going with this, just to simplify this, is that I think that at least in my case, prudent management of capital is a core value that is ingrained in me. I was raised to be thrifty. I wasn't cheap, neither were my parents, but we were taught to be very careful with money. So UCEazy, 8 years from zero to now, is fully self-funded. We have gone here this far because we have managed our capital so far, while treating everyone that needs to be paid with utmost respect and paying all our bills on time. This includes our vendors, people that we advertise with, refunds to customers, paying our employees, contractors, always on time. But the core value was financial prudence and not wasting money. I think that is just imbibed in me and my co-founder, VK. So that, I think, is a big part of what I learned about. So your question was about personal journey and how this relates. The second part is in terms of solutioning, especially how it applies to what we are trying to do. There's a huge so this obviously is not new to our listeners, or especially, but when we talk about niche markets, another thing that Jeffrey Moore said, once you identify that niche market, identify their problem, then your solutions got to be 110%.
110% means exceeding customer
Correct.
Expectation?
Right. You should, say you identify this group of customers. In our case, we said that families that are highly educated and affluent immigrants from Asia, they have certain needs in terms of preparing their kids for college admissions. What does that solution portfolio look like? Address the solution portfolio 100%. No objections from them should say, oh, we don't have it today, or etc., or it'll come in the future. None of that works. To get to that 110%, if you have to make your pond even smaller, do that, but don't go to them for 99%. You'll be wasting time because they'll not sign up, or even if they do, customer satisfaction will not be there, and then you'll not get word of mouth, and then your customer acquisition cost goes up.
Okay.
So my Asian journey in this case helped me a lot because I could get inside the minds of these parents to figure out what the total solution looks like. And this is where I think this now is becoming a huge competitive differentiator. When parents ask me, Mr. Gupta, that's what they call me, education and all that, right? Why are you different? And I said, you're looking at the difference. My team is enabling that vision, but who understands more than I do as to what your needs are? By the virtue of your student being in a US high school, is your family now 100% same as another family where the parents were born here and educated? And if you're saying yes, you're fooling yourself. That's not true, because parenting and how you look at your kids involve deep-seated beliefs and values, right? I came to this country when I was 28. My beliefs and values, how I look at the world, they're all deeply formed.
Yeah, that's true.
So by the virtue of us coming to the US, does that change overnight? Now, we can try to culturally assimilate, but the core beliefs don't go. I still enjoy Indian music much more than I enjoy American rock music, right? So understanding of your customer at a deep level, it just allows us more connection and better solutioning.
Also, it's kind of interesting, relates to my next question, which is a more like a general question relating to your Asian cultural background, heritage, whether or if it creates advantages or benefits for your new venture journey. Similarly, whether your cultural background creates disadvantages and challenges in your new venture journey.
Profound question, Roger. Okay. I think there are two parts to this. The first is I think the immigrant journey is a strength because that provides hunger.
Okay.
And I don't think that our listeners need explanation on that. Because we are trying to settle in our new home, we don't feel secure financially otherwise, and that breeds hunger. And that is the fuel of any entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's very correct.
Right? I'm in my 50s. I'm not a young chicken. For me to work 14-hour days is not easy. But at 12 o'clock in the night, when my body is saying you need to go to sleep, but the mind is saying, go harder because if you don't, somebody else is going to shut UCEazy down. See, that hunger is, at the end of the day, what keeps an enterprise going is that hunger and that fuel of the leadership. There are more bad days than good days. My daughter is an entrepreneur, by the way, right here in San Francisco in the fintech space. I obviously love her, and I do care about how much stress is she going through. This is the journey, but we signed up for it, right? So I think that immigrant journey provides the fuel to get going. Second part, though, I think there is a negative also. In my specific experience, I think that as we hire more and more people from this all-American culture, people are team members that were born here, raised here, sometimes it's hard for me to understand them fully because I don't have the shared life experience like they do in terms of how they view the world.
That's a good point.
I didn't grow up here, right? I don't share the same music or the same film history. Like between them, they might all sing a song that makes them bond, whatever that might have been there when they were growing up. Sometimes you also look at things from a place of trust, not realizing what that other person is. So I think that understanding of people is a function of how well you understand the culture and values. So you end up making mistakes. Or sometimes you might read wrongly into a person who's good intentioned, but you apply a different cultural and values framework to it. That, I think, can be a handicap. How do you address that? You find team members who will compliment you on that.
Compliment, right, yeah.
Instead of beating yourself and saying, you're a bad manager or you should know this, it's like, accept that you are different. But then you hire the right kind of people that will fill that gap for you.
So, so actually, your answer is, very insightful, which makes a lot of sense about the immigrant journey itself is an asset, because immigrant itself just like a startup. You search for survival and growth.
If I can interrupt, I'm going to give you a juicy nugget.
Sure.
Which I'm going to credit my daughter Vrinda on this. And one day over dinner, my wife, she and I, we were talking, and because we are now two entrepreneurs in the family. And my wife was saying, I haven't taken any risk in my life. I'm not an entrepreneur unlike you guys. And my daughter said something very profound, which has stuck with me. She said, guys, take a pause. Think about who is the biggest entrepreneur. First of all, what is an entrepreneur? Entrepreneur is a risk taker
how do
for
you
a purpose.
define it? Yeah.
Right? Immigrants are the biggest entrepreneurs there are. Who takes a risk of leaving a country where you grew up in, especially if the immigrants are like you and me? I wasn't financially underprivileged when I came here, right? I was already highly educated in the top 1% of the Indian society. I was an entrepreneur. So that's what my daughter said, that guys, don't beat yourself that you're not entrepreneurs. This is the biggest risk that you took, right? So anyways, sorry I interrupted you.
No, it's a very, very good point. Yeah, so following that, let's look at the same question from slightly different angle. Beside this entrepreneurship journey piece, which kind of creates, as you correctly point out, advantages, disadvantages. Disadvantage means misunderstanding. Is there any kind of element from the being an Asian culture that creates either advantage or disadvantages in your new venture journey?
Yeah, I discussed the advantages, disadvantages. Wow, this is a very slippery slope, but I'm going to go there. How do I put this in a good manner? I think that I'm too trusting. And I could be wrong. It's hard for me to generalize this, but, or actually, I'm going to reframe that. I think I'm too loyal. And I think that that loyalty comes from my journey from growing up in India. That and modesty or humility were key tenets of that culture. Again, like I said, it's a slippery slope. I'm not trying to generalize at all that other cultures don't have that. In my personal situation, I think that, and I've been told that by my team members, Vinnie, you're sometimes loyal to a fault. Like in some cases, some team members who simply are not contributing much or possibly are hurting, I don't let them go easily, so I'm not ruthless.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay, loyalty. Okay.
So I'm always like, oh, this person has been with us. He or she has shown loyalty. I think sometimes that comes at the cost to the organization because I don't make those ruthless decisions quickly. So part of that is, I think, trust. Again, this is a slippery slope, Roger. I don't want to say that this is other cultures don't have it or not, but I think that, in my experience, I think that the all-American culture, people are taught to be accountable from day one. It's just how the culture is. But out of that, I think people also become more individualistic and self-focused. Again, I'm trying to be very careful about my choice of words.
That's a realistic. Yeah, that's true.
So in my case, I've been hurt, and UCEazy has been hurt because I kept going with loyalty, and the people at the other end were just looking out for themselves. Nothing wrong in what they did. I'm going to say that one more time. They were just looking out for their professional interest. I applied a loyalty framework to a business environment. And in hindsight, I should not have. In hindsight, I think, but Roger, I struggle with it. That long-term teams are built on a shared sense of purpose and loyalty to each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Where is the balance between that and complete professional relationships? I haven't figured it out, quite honestly. I struggle with that, but when I'm tired and my heart takes over, I tend to go towards what I am, which is taking people on face value and going with loyalty than ruthlessness.
First way is, what is your kind of a general reflection of entrepreneurship and relating to your reflection of the lessons, wisdom, what's your advice to young people, especially young Asians, let's say, who are inspired to become successful entrepreneurs?
Couple of things, maybe three. The first is, do not chase money.
Do not chase money.
That's the first and biggest thing that whatever you do, do it with a sense of purpose. You need to have deep belief in it. Again, I go back to this. Entrepreneurial journey is hard. You can be someone brilliant like an Elon Musk, and I don't know him at all, so I don't even know what his journey was, or the people that founded Uber, but it's a very hard journey. On a rainy day, on a tired body, tired mind, upset customers, little money in the bank, what will hold you there is a deep connection to the purpose. Why am I doing this? And if that connection is not there, do not do this. You'll be miserable. Entrepreneurship, if the way at least I have done it, and I see my daughter doing this, it's an all-consuming exercise. It's not a job. There is no work-life balance, guys. It simply doesn't exist. So talk to your family, get their permission, get their support. But unless the sense of purpose is there, like in my case, what keeps me going? whenever there is a bad day, I pick the phone and I call a customer. They energize me because it reminds me why I did this. And then I say, and then someday I will have a customer who is rightfully or wrongly mad at me. But then I go back and I call another customer and I realize that, hey, it's fine because you're still making a difference. I think that sense of purpose needs to drive this. And I keep telling my daughter this also. Money, professional success, reputation, media coverage, power, influence, everything will happen. But your North Star got to be sense of purpose.
Okay. So that's kind of more sustaining, driving force.
It's never money. I wouldn't say never, never. People are different, but by and large, if you say that I'm doing this because I want 60 million in the bank by the time I'm 30, probably not going to work. So that's my biggest advice to entrepreneurs. The second is, this is from my personal journey. If you have it in you to be an entrepreneur, do it earlier in life than later. This is also a physical, consuming journey. 14-hour work days don't come easy unless you have the body working for you.
Yeah.
I wish that in my case I had done this when I had the first calling in my 20s. That do it then, trust me. There's another advantage of young, because we're having such a candid conversation. As you get older, your experience works for you because you make sound business decisions. As compared to an entrepreneur in their 20s, or they don't have the basics of business right.
Yeah.
But what do they have? Fearlessness. And that fearlessness comes from not knowing. It's very counterintuitive.
I know.
Right? I think, so take Google as an example, right? The founders were technically brilliant, but at some point they said, let's get an adult in the mix who can do the business end of things, right? So I think that's an advantage of being young, is that in my case, big ideas, sometimes I would check them on my own because my life has taught me this is not going to work. But sometimes that can be a bad thing because then it stops you from trying out big things. So that will be my second advice, is that if you have an entrepreneurial itch, act on it. Don't sit on it. So those will be my two big advices, that driven by purpose, and don't sit on your entrepreneurial itch. That's never a good time. The good time is now. I think that the one question to ask here would be, when you go into an entrepreneurial journey, I think it's that how do you set yourself up for that marathon ahead? I think that's the question. And I think that involving your personal stakeholders and making sure that they are bought in is extremely important. Now, if you're a young entrepreneur or not into relationships, it's easier. But if you're already in a relationship, then I think then having a candid chat with whosoever, be it parents or be it a relationship, a spouse, aligning with them, I think it's really, really important, because this journey is long, arduous, and a lot of times you would be, in spite of your happiness and fulfillment, your emotional tank may be empty, which means that to your loved ones, you have nothing to give. So which means that they need to be bought in for whatever reasons. And I think that that is important, because once you secure, one is capital, right? But the second is emotional support.
Yeah, that's true.
You need both, I think.
Yeah, because we're all social animals. We have our own kind of a stakeholder in a sense. Yeah, that's great. And thank you, Vinnie. Actually, that's a really kind of lots of very insightful wisdoms, for our audience. And I really appreciate you sharing these great points. Well, that's interesting. Maybe that's kind of relating to a slightly different question, yet extremely important question relevant to many entrepreneurs, which is the pre-product market pre-product market fit stage. Did you just say speed of experimenting, speeding of trying is extremely crucial? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So absolutely, that I think that which is Silicon Valley's got that anyways in the software world and all that, right? Which is agile development.
Yeah.
That once you know what your target market is, once you know what their problem is, once you know the skeleton of your solution, then create a small thing, go test it out. Don't overthink it.
Do not overthink about it.
The initial stuff, the key is talk to customers. That your team initially. That's another big lesson learned is that initially staff your team with people who love talking to customers. Team members who are comfortable behind their digital screens or whatever. I'm not saying everyone needs to be customer facing, but customer feedback, understanding of who they are, what their pain points are, that's the lifeblood of an early stage company. So staff of your team with everybody or as many people who would say, I've got 5 minutes or I've got 15 minutes, I have nothing to do. You know what, I'm going to call a customer and just check in and say, how are we doing? What can we do better? There is no better use of your time.
Well, that's very powerful. How do you best use your spare time? Talk to the customer and to learn something you may never expect. You learn.
And if everyone on your team, I say to my team, what are you doing that is so important that you cannot call at least one customer a week? And if you're not doing that, it's a mindset issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Then what are you doing here? Right? Right? I mean, argue with me as much. It's like, why aren't you on the phone with the one customer every week, at least one? Oh, I don't have time. It's like, you have time to go to the bathroom, right? You have time to eat. You have time to brush your teeth. Why is this not important?
It's all a priority kind of an issue.
It's all a priority. And needless to say, this is not new, Roger, right? That in the long term, the organizations that win and keep winning sustainable market value comes from being closer to your customers. Yeah. So what I'm saying is nothing new at all. I think
that's true.
Humans figured this out 2,000 years back, right?
Right. So the next question, now we are moving to, I think we have time, not too much. Could you share with us so-called a tough moment in your journey and also the tough decisions? And then, what are they? Can you give us some example and how do you kind of tackle those tough decisions, issues, and maybe whether your Asian culture somehow influenced the way you kind of deal with those difficult challenges or tough moments in your journey?
There were, Roger, as I have been saying, that entrepreneurial journey has more tough days than easy ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Given that, just to give you specific examples, I think that in our case, in UCEazy journey, the very first one was whether to pivot or not. So when we started UCEazy, we actually, because I came from the technology world, and my co-founder is he comes from the software world, Oracle and similar companies. We were trying to solve the same problem through software. And we put our heart out in the first year in developing apps and those kind of things. And we realized nobody wants to pay for all this. So instead of sulking and frustrating whatever, we literally make a decision to pivot like this. It's like, dude, this is not working, let's move. Now, to your question about how does the Asian thing came in, prudent management of capital. Also, I did not want to risk my family while trying to develop my passion. That's the Asian culture, right? It was a core driver. Before founding UCEazy, I used to work for big companies, stable job and all that. When I founded UCEazy, I put that income at risk. That's my Asian mindset. I did not want to put my family's savings at risk. So when I realized that, hey, it's been 1 year or more than that, we are still not generating revenue, we pivoted very quickly. I think that in this case, the Asian values possibly became a strength. Now, if I was more of a risk taker or a fighter, I possibly might have said, you're not going to quit on this idea. This was your idea, and you took pride in that idea, and you say, I could have possibly hung around with a bad idea longer.
Okay.
In this case, we pivoted literally in a jiffy. It's like, done, dude. It's like all this software, and my engineering team was, what about all this software? Tough luck, let's go. It's like, that's market reality. I mean, you guys can put whatever stuff on the walls and say you develop software, but if nobody's paying for it, nobody's paying for it.
Could you share with us so-called a tough moment in your journey and also the tough decisions? And then, how do you, so what are they? Can you give us some example, and how do you kind of tackle those tough decisions, issues, and, maybe, whether your Asian culture somehow influenced the way you kind of deal with those difficult challenges or tough moments in your journey?
There were, Roger, as I have been saying, that entrepreneurial journey has more tough days than easy ones.
Yeah.
Given that, just to give you specific examples, I think that in our case, in UCEazy journey, the very first one was whether to pivot or not. So when we started UCEazy, we actually, because I came from the technology world, and my co-founder is he comes from the software world, Oracle and similar companies. We were trying to solve the same problem through software. And we put our heart out in the first year in developing apps and those kind of things. And we realized nobody wants to pay for all this. So instead of sulking and frustrating whatever, we literally make a decision to pivot like this. It's like, dude, this is not working, let's move. Now, to your question about how does the Asian thing came in, prudent management of capital. Also, I did not want to risk my family while trying to develop my passion. That's the Asian culture, right? It was a core driver. Before founding UCEazy, I used to work for big companies, stable job and all that. When I founded UCEazy, I put that income at risk. That's my Asian mindset. I did not want to put my family's savings at risk. So when I realized that, hey, it's been 1 year or more than that, we are still not generating revenue, we pivoted very quickly. I think that in this case, the Asian values possibly became a strength. Now, if I was more of a risk taker or a fighter, I possibly might have said, you're not going to quit on this idea. This was your idea, and you took pride in that idea, and you say, I could have possibly hung around with a bad idea longer.
Okay.
In this case, we pivoted literally in a jiffy. It's like, done, dude. It's like all this software, and my engineering team was, what about all this software? Tough luck, let's go. It's like, that's market reality. I mean, you guys can put whatever stuff on the walls and say you develop software, but if nobody's paying for it, nobody's paying for it.
It seems to me that's not very tough decision. So what is the tough part of it in like a difficult decision?
In this case, we were running out of cash.
Oh, I see.
We had no, because we put all our, I borrowed from, my co-founder and I, we borrowed from our families, and our agreement was that, okay, you can use so much. We were at the end of our runway.
Oh.
We needed to pivot to generate cash because we were still self-funded.
Yeah, that typically, it is a kind of major decision, right? You kind of change direction, right?
I mean, there are many other tough moments, I think. A lot of them recently have been about reorganizing the team.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit on that?
So, in our case, because we are essentially an education business, but we are a business because we are for-profit and we are self-funded. One of the challenges that we have had is, what should the company culture be? And what kind of people should we hire?
Yeah.
Are these people, should they be from the business world who understand business and top line and bottom line? Or are these people from academia who, in general, come from an insulated world and they don't understand how all this stuff gets paid? And we went back and forth on what the culture is. And so over the last 2 years, we just realized that, for example, that people that came to us purely from academia, especially public K-12, they somehow just did not make a good transition into a for-profit world. These were not bad people. They were competent. It's just that the constant need for managing their world and the needs and the cash needs of business became aggravating to them because that's not what they did. And so to swap out that team, or to first of all trying to see whether they would change in some ways, do a cultural thing just to realize that it just doesn't work that way. People in their 30s and 40s are in general hard, their core beliefs and values are hard
it's
to
already
change.
established, right? Okay, so that's a tough kind of a, yeah, I agree, because every time, every organization, when you face that kind of a situation, is not easy.
Right.
Right.
So that to rebuild that team, to start from scratch, we all know that hiring and onboarding people is such a big investment of resource and time. So those are very tough decisions.
You know, actually, Vinnie, I thought this might be a very good question many new ventures or entrepreneurs would like to learn, because they also need to continuously pivot. In your case, the context, the pivot is to adjust the team. So do you have any kind of lessons or advice on how to deal with those kind of readjusting, reconfiguring your teams because the company needs to change?
My lesson, Roger, is don't delay it.
Don't delay.
Once you realize what needs to be done, don't keep hoping for things. In those hopes, as they say, hope is not a strategy. It's like once you realize not working, the second part of that, I think, is believe your gut.
Believe your gut.
Right? Now, you may be young. You might be someone like me in his 50s, or you might be young. But we became entrepreneurs because we believed in ourselves. And if we don't believe in ourselves, how would our customers believe in us? So believe your gut. And if your gut is telling you once, hey, it's something wrong with this, maybe you can say, I'm going to give my gut a second chance, but beyond that, that's it. So you need to move on this one. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll simply delay the inevitable, but in the meantime, the mess will keep getting messier and harder to clean up. It's like you're leaking plumbing in your bathroom. You don't fix it. At some point, it's going to go into your bedroom, into your hardwood floor.
Yeah, you better fix it early.
Better fix it early. So don't delay the inevitable. Above all, I think, is go with your gut. If your gut is telling you, screaming loud at you, it's like you don't listen to it, then what are you doing?
As I mentioned to you earlier, a lot of people follow very similar career path, starting from employee, like working for companies. Then they become founders, right? So, and also some people even, as you mentioned, similar to your situation, starting from the technology background, now if they want to run their own business, they got to move toward the business side. So from technology to business, from employee being a founder. So, what are the lessons you kind of experienced? Do you have any made mistakes? And so what's the advice in managing that kind of a transition?
I'm going to give you, if I can, Roger, a little bit longer answer.
Sure.
Or a bigger picture answer, because this also goes to the core of what UCEazy is doing now. Which goes into, you need to figure out as early as you can, who are you? Where do you want to go? As part of our programs, we're trying to teach all this to students in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. It's very tough, I understand, but you need to start there. Why am I bringing all this up? I should have never been in the corporate world. Never, not for a day. Accepting that I was risk averse early on and got married, had kids, one reason after another, and I kept going away. I got into the corporate world, which sucked my soul. I felt intellectually unfulfilled. And it's like, hey, I have this God-given intelligence, and I'm using a fraction of it. A big problem of corporate world, especially mid to large-sized companies, is that that whole model is contingent upon square pegs for square holes. That's how it works. We are hiring you for a marketing job. We expect you to be really good at it, but that's all you do. Don't go outside the swim lane or else. I was a generalist that was forced into the square peg. So what did that do to me? It made me miserable. Our life is limited. And we don't even know whether I'm going to be alive tomorrow. Why do that stupidity is what I say, right? So in my case, the transition should have been done on day 0.
That was day 0. Okay, you made a mistake, actually.
So I remember back in India when I had my full-time MBA at a very premier institution called the Indian Institute of Management, I would read entrepreneur books all the time. That's how passionate I was. And my friends would make fun of me. I never followed that. But after I came out of it, of my MBA program, I went into a job and all of that stuff and got into the rut of things. Don't do it to yourself. Just don't do it. It ain't worth it. So the net, I think, so coming to your question about that transition, it was not hard at all. I've never been happier.
Yeah. For you, it's kind of just a reverse kind of a thing. You correct your mistake in a sense.
My wife actually says that, every new organization, entrepreneurial venture, most of them are not cash positive for a while. So after I left these big company environments and all that, and for the next several years, UCEazy, I wasn't getting any compensation, but she constantly kept telling me, I've never seen you happier or this fulfilled. Now, think about it, right? We know that that passion and that self-fulfillment would drive your entrepreneurial journey, but imagine what can you give back to your family? If you're feeling good and happy and fulfilled, will that go around to your family and to your loved ones? So to me, the transition was easy. I just felt that I'd been uncaged. The corporate world was just, again, I'm not saying that the corporate world or the big company world is not for everyone. Different people have different needs.
Yeah, that's important, right.
Right. If you know how to play the system, if you are comfortable in being a specialist, or if very early on you somehow break through the clutter to get into executive positions, then the corporate world is a good place. Otherwise, it can actually be soul-sucking for a lot of people. I mean, there are studies that in education you would have done, right? How many people are actually happy with their jobs? Under 30%, right? Why are we doing all this? I just don't get it.